The sun was setting over the quiet suburb of Maplewood, painting the brick facade of the Miller house in shades of orange and long, melancholy shadow. Inside, Eleanor Miller stood at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a cooling mug of chamomile tea she had no intention of drinking. The silence was a physical presence, a thick, heavy blanket she wore every day since the funeral. David, her husband of 12 years, was gone. A sudden, cruel coronary on his morning jog, 6 months ago. The vibrant, ambitious architect who had filled these rooms with booming laughter and grand plans was now a collection of memories, a scent fading from his pillows, and a profound, echoing absence. Eleanor's grief was a private, meticulous thing. She had organized the memorial, handled the wills, and sorted through his belongings with a sort of robotic efficiency. She had kept the sprawling colonial house immaculate, as if maintaining order in her environment could somehow impose order on the shattered landscape of her heart. Her only son from her first marriage, Kyle, was away at college on the West Coast, and their weekly video calls were brief, filled with his new life and her careful assurances that she was managing. The doorbell chimed, a cheerful sound that felt alien. Frowning, Eleanor padded to the front door. The porch light revealed a figure that made her breath catch. It was a young man, tall and lanky, with a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a look of profound weariness on his face. He had David's eyes, the same intense, hazel green gaze that had first captivated her. "Liam?" she whispered, her hand flying to her throat. "Hey, Elle," Liam said, his voice rough. David's son from his first marriage. He was 22 now, a man, not the rebellious, sullen 15-year-old she'd last seen 7 years ago. Back then, after a particularly nasty fight with David about rules and curfews, Liam had left to live full-time with his mother in another state. The departure had been a raw wound for David, one that never fully healed, and Liam's contact had dwindled to sporadic, awkward holiday texts. Eleanor had always felt a pang of unresolved maternal guilt around him. She'd tried to be a stepmother, but the chemistry was off, the timing was wrong, and then he was gone. What are you doing here?" she asked, stepping back to let him in. He shuffled inside, dropping his bag on the polished hardwood floor with a thud. "Mom's situation isn't great. New boyfriend, not a lot of room. And I heard about Dad. I'm sorry I didn't come for the service. I just couldn't." He looked around the familiar foyer, his eyes lingering on a framed photo of David on a hiking trail. "I didn't know where else to go." A maelstrom of emotions hit Eleanor: surprise, residual hurt on David's behalf, and a fierce, unexpected surge of protectiveness. This was David's blood. This was the boy he'd ached for. "This is your home, Liam," she heard herself say, the words surprising her with their conviction. "Of course, you can stay." Thus began the awkward, silent coexistence. Liam moved into his old room, which Eleanor had turned into a sewing studio. He quietly cleared out the sewing machine and fabrics, stacking them neatly in the guest room closet without being asked. He was a ghost in the house, tiptoeing around, cleaning up after his minimal meals, speaking only when necessary. Eleanor, trapped in her own rituals of grief, didn't know how to bridge the chasm. They were two satellites orbiting the same loss, never connecting. The first fracture in the ice came 2 weeks later. Eleanor, lost in a memory while making David's favorite pasta aglio e olio, let the garlic burn. Acrid smoke filled the kitchen, setting off the shrieking alarm. She stood frozen, overwhelmed, staring at the blackened pan as if it were the epitome of all her failures. Suddenly, Liam was there. He swiftly opened the back door and windows, fanned the alarm with a dish towel, and took the pan from her numb hands. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm. "I burn stuff all the time." Tears, which she had kept so meticulously at bay for months, began to stream down her face. It was just burnt garlic, but it was everything. The planned meal for a ghost, the loneliness of eating it alone, the failure to keep even this small thing perfect. She didn't sob, just stood there weeping silently. Liam didn't hug her. He just started pulling out new ingredients. "Okay," he said, almost to himself. "Onions, fresh garlic, butter. We'll do a carbonara instead. Dad liked that too, right?" Through her tears, Eleanor nodded. They cooked in silence, but it was a different silence. It was companionable. He chopped, she whisked eggs. He fried pancetta, she grated cheese. When they sat down to eat at the kitchen island, it was the first meal she hadn't eaten alone in half a year. "Thank you, Liam," she said softly. "It's just pasta, Elle." "It's not," she said. And he understood. That small collaboration opened a door. They began to talk, stiltedly at first, about mundane things, the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, the overgrown hedges. Liam, it turned out, had a knack for fixing things. He'd spent the last few years doing odd jobs, construction, auto repair. He had David's practical, problem-solving mind, but without the college degree and the blueprints. He was hands-on. One Saturday, he asked about the storage boxes in the garage, the ones marked David's office. Eleanor had been avoiding them. With Liam's quiet support, they opened them. Instead of just files and architectural plans, they found treasure, photo albums from David's youth, his vinyl record collection, a shoebox filled with ticket stubs from concerts and baseball games. They spent the afternoon on the living room floor, listening to David's old Springsteen records. "He took me to a game once," Liam said, holding a faded ticket stub from Wrigley Field. "I was maybe 10. I complained the whole time about the heat and the crowds. I wish I hadn't." He talked about that game for years, Eleanor said. He didn't remember the heat. He remembered you trying to keep score and eating 2 hot dogs. Liam looked at her, his eyes shiny. "Really?" Eleanor nodded. "He loved you so much, Liam." "The fight, it broke him. He thought he'd pushed you away for good." "I was a stupid kid," Liam muttered. "I thought he was trying to replace my mum with you. By the time I figured it out, it felt like too much time had passed. And then, it really was too late." They shared stories that night. Eleanor told Liam about the David she knew, the ambitious but tender man, his terrible singing in the shower, his fear of deep water. Liam told her about the dad of his childhood, the one who built elaborate Lego castles, who taught him to throw a curveball, who cried when he dropped him off at his mom's after weekends. In sharing David, they began to weave a new, fragile connection. Liam started calling her Elle, not with teenage defiance, but with affection. She stopped seeing him as a ghost or a responsibility, and began to see the man he was becoming, thoughtful, skilled, burdened with his own regrets. Liam encouraged her to leave the house. He gently pushed her to resume her long-abandoned hobby of landscape painting. He'd drive her to the local state park and sit reading a book while she sketched the river, slowly relearning how to see color and beauty in the world. One evening, she came across Liam in the backyard, staring at the crumbling brick patio David had always meant to fix. "You know," she said, joining him, "your father had plans for this. An outdoor kitchen, a fire pit. He never got around to it." Liam was quiet for a moment. "I could build it," he said finally. "I've done hardscaping. It would be like finishing something for him." The project became their therapy. They pored over David's sketched plans together, adjusting, budgeting, ordering materials. Days were filled with the solid, satisfying work of digging foundations, laying bricks, mixing mortar. Eleanor, who had always been more about spreadsheets and interior decor, learned to wear work gloves and wield a level. She and Liam argued about mortar consistency and the slope for drainage, their debates ending in laughter and compromise. Their hands grew calloused together. The physical labor was a release, a way to transmute grief into something concrete and beautiful. As they built the patio, they built a family. Not the family they had expected or planned, but a real one, forged in shared loss and mutual effort. Eleanor found herself looking forward to Liam coming home from his part-time job at the hardware store. She'd make iced tea, and they'd sit on the half-finished stones, talking about their day. One night, under a blanket of stars, the fire pit they had built finally lit and casting dancing shadows, Liam spoke into the flames. "You didn't have to do this, Elle. Take me in. After everything, after me being such a jerk as a kid." Eleanor looked at the young man across from her, his face illuminated by firelight, so much of his father and his features, but with a softer, more vulnerable soul. "Family isn't about what you have to do, Liam. It's about what you choose to do, every day. I chose your father, and in coming here, you chose me. You chose us. That makes this a real home." He didn't reply, just nodded, his throat working, but the look he gave her was one of absolute, unwavering belonging. The finished patio was a masterpiece, a testament to David's vision and their collective effort. They held a small inauguration, inviting a few neighbors. As people laughed and talked in the space David had dreamed of, Eleanor felt a pang, but it was sweet, not just bitter. He was there, in the design, in the bricks Liam had laid, in the memories they all shared. A few weeks later, Kyle came home from college for summer break. Eleanor was nervous about the dynamic between her biological son and her rediscovered stepson. Kyle, the business major, polished and urbane, and Liam, the quiet tradesman with weathered hands. The first dinner was awkward, but Liam, with a quiet confidence, showed Kyle the patio, explaining the work. Kyle, impressed, asked thoughtful questions. Later, Eleanor overheard them in the den, talking not about David or the past, but about baseball and video games. The sound of their laughter, deep and young and mingling together, was a sound that healed something deep within her. It was the sound of a present and a future. The story of Eleanor and Liam is a true infinity story. It is not a romance, but a story of a love that loops and endures in different forms. The love she had for David did not die, it transformed. It became the foundation